Welcome, everyone. Today we will see how switching between power and falling factorial bases turns into matrix inversion, and why the two Stirling matrices undo each other. Last time we used a clever indicator variable trick to predict structure inside a random permutation, and today we push that idea to the series finale. Two totally different counting tables will turn out to undo each other exactly. Our destination is the duality theorem. The Stirling numbers of the second kind and the signed Stirling numbers of the first kind form inverse matrices. The core idea is simple. It is just a round trip between two polynomial bases. So we will build it with small examples before any big general statement.
So we are going to see why two different Stirling tables cancel out like an encode and decode step?
Exactly, and we will connect it back to cycles, partitions, and inversion formulas you can actually use. Here is the punchline from lecture 11. The expected number of cycles is a harmonic number, and that came from adding up simple yes or no indicators. The method was build a complicated count from many tiny events. That mindset will reappear today, but in an algebraic disguise. When we count cycles precisely, the numbers that appear are the Stirling numbers of the first kind, the ones that track how permutations break into cycles. So the big question is, why should the partition numbers from the second kind and the cycle numbers from the first kind fit together perfectly as inverses?
That feels like two different worlds. I want to see the mechanism.
If I hand you two infinite triangles of integers, it is already amazing when one is the inverse of the other. Here it happens for a deep reason. They are change of basis matrices. This is a destination written as a single line. Multiply the second kind matrix by the first kind matrix, and you get the identity, meaning a perfect undo operation.
So each one is like the decoder for the other?
The second kind counts grouping, how to split unlabeled items into k unlabeled non-empty blocks. The first kind counts cycling, how many permutations break into exactly k disjoint cycles. The identity matrix means Kronecker delta entries, 1 when the indices match and 0 otherwise. We will make that pop out from composing two polynomial expansions. Think of polynomials like vectors. You can choose different coordinate systems, and the same polynomial gets different coordinates in different bases. The usual coordinates come from powers of x. Degree tells you where you live in that coordinate system. But there's another natural basis, x, then x times x minus 1, then x times x minus 1, times x minus 2, and so on. It matches counting without repetition. This identity says every power x to the n can be rewritten as a combination of falling factorials, and the coefficients are Stirling numbers of the second kind. And this one goes back the other way. Each falling factorial is a polynomial in x, and the coefficients are the signed Stirling numbers of the first kind.
So one table translates powers into falling factorials, and the other table translates falling factorials back into powers.
Now we do the key move. Substitute the second identity into the first, and watch what must happen to the coefficients of each power of x. This is the round trip written out. Start with x to the n, expand into falling factorials. Then expand each falling factorial back into powers, and finally collect like terms of x to the k. The j-index is which falling factorial you used in the middle step. Only finitely many appear, because everything is lower triangular by degree. Then, the k-index is the final power basis term. Collecting coefficients is the moment where matrix multiplication is hiding. For the round trip to truly return x to the n, every coefficient must match. The coefficient of x to the k must be 1 if k equals n and 0 otherwise. That is exactly the Kronecker delta condition.
So the identity matrix is literally forced by matching coefficients.
Let us state the result cleanly. These are the orthogonality relations, and they are exactly what it means for two lower triangular matrices to be inverses. Read this as row times column. Fix n as the row in the second kind table, fix k as a column in the first kind table, and the dot product becomes a Kronecker delta. And this is the other multiplication order. Now it is row n from the first kind dotted with column k from the second kind, again producing the same delta behavior. Equation 5 is exactly the statement that the product s times s equals the identity matrix entry by entry. Equation 6 says the inverse works both ways. S times S also equals identity, which is what you expect from true inverses.
And because both are lower triangular with ones on the diagonal, this feels very plausible.
Before we trust the infinity-sized statement, let us verify it on the first non-trivial chunk, rows and columns 1 through 4. This is the second kind triangle packaged as a matrix. Each row, n, lists the coefficients for expanding x to the n into falling factorials. And here is the signed first kind matrix. It converts falling factorial coordinates back into power coordinates, which is why you see alternating signs.
I notice ones on the diagonal in both. That is a strong hint that they might be invertible.
Lower triangular means degree cannot increase during a basis change. That is the algebraic reason the sums stop at j equals n. Now we multiply them like ordinary matrices. If the duality is real, we should get the 4x4 identity right here. A computer check is not a proof, but it is a great way to build trust before we lean on the theorem. When you run it, you see ones down the diagonal and zeros everywhere else. That is exactly the Kronecker delta pattern we predicted. Interpretation. If you translate a polynomial into falling factorial coordinates and translate back, you land on the same polynomial with no distortion.
So the inverse property is not a coincidence, it is built into what a basis change means.
Now run it and compare. The printed matrix has ones down the diagonal and zeros everywhere else matching the prediction. In particular, the 4-2 entry really is 0. Interpretation. If you translate a polynomial into falling factorial coordinates and translate back, you land on the same polynomial with no distortion.
So the inverse property is not a coincidence, it is built into what a basis change means.
Let us open up one off-diagonal entry and watch cancellation happen numerically. This is exactly one dot product, row 4 of the second kind against column 2 of the first kind. Because 4 is not equal to 2, it must cancel to 0.
The numbers look messy, but the 0 is clean. That is satisfying.
Off the diagonal, the identity matrix has zeros, so these sums are built to cancel. That is why the word orthogonality is used. The dot product vanishes. On the diagonal, when k equals n, the sum has to come out to 1 because the round trip must preserve the leading term exactly. Matrix inverses are not just pretty, they are tools. The tool here is an inversion formula for sequences. This is the forward Stirling transform. F is built from G using the second kind coefficients, like multiplying by the matrix S. And this is the inverse transform. To recover G from F, you use the signed first kind coefficients, which is multiplying by the inverse matrix S.
So knowing either F or G is enough as long as you know which Stirling table connects them.
This works for the same reason our polynomials worked. Apply S, then apply S, and everything collapses back to what you started with. If you have seen Mobius inversion, this should feel familiar. A structured summation transform has a built-in inverse that restores the original data. Let us isolate the structural reason the inverse must exist. The falling factorial basis is degree ordered and has the same leading term as the power basis. This single line explains the lower triangular shape. When you expand a falling factorial, you always get x to the n plus, only lower degree terms, never higher. That is why entries above the diagonal are 0. You cannot manufacture x to the fifths from something that started at degree 3. And the ones on the diagonal mean the leading term is preserved with coefficient 1, so no scaling happens at the top degree. Put those together and you get uniqueness. Every polynomial has exactly one coordinate vector in each basis, so the change of basis map must be invertible.
So the deep theorem is really linear algebra wearing combinatorics clothing.
Combinatorially, the two kinds live in different stories, partitions versus permutations. The duality says those stories are linked by a perfect algebraic undo button. Second kind is about merging labels into groups that naturally connects to functions and images, which is why powers x to the n show up. First kind is about how a permutation decomposes into cycles. The falling factorial basis is a natural companion because it models choosing distinct labels step by step. The word inverse is not saying partitions literally turn into cycles. It says the algebraic transforms attached to these counting problems reverse each other.
So grouping and cycling are dual through the polynomial basis change, not by a direct matching of objects.
Finally, the sign is not mysterious. It is exactly what makes the inverse work in the power basis, because expanding a product like x times x minus 1 creates alternating cancellations. Let us zoom out. This duality is the climax because it explains why so many different looking identities kept fitting together throughout the series. This is the whole story in one picture. Powers to falling factorials using S, then back using S. A round trip must be identity, so the matrices must be inverses. Early on, we built the second kind from partitions, recurrences, and counting onto functions. That is the S side of the duality. Then, we discovered falling factorials as the right basis for discrete calculus, which is exactly the middle basis that makes inversion natural. Finally, we built the first kind from cycles, probabilities, and signs. Today we learned it is not separate from S at all. It is the inverse transform.
So the deepest fact is that all these viewpoints are the same map, just in different coordinates.
Let us end by actually using the inverse. I will give you a short transform, and you will recover the original sequence. This is the setup. F is obtained from G using the second kind numbers, just like multiplying by the matrix S. Your data are 3 values of F. We will recover G at 0, 1, 2 by applying the inverse transform. Here is the undo button. Compute G by summing F against the assigned first kind numbers in row n. Now compute G of 0 is just F of 0. G of 1 is 1 times F of 1. For G of 2, you take minus 1 times F of 1 plus 1 times F of 2, giving 3.
Nice, it feels like solving a triangular system from the top down.
Reflection answer. Because coordinates in a basis are unique. If you return to the same polynomial for every n, then every coefficient vector must return unchanged, which is exactly the identity matrix condition. Thanks for watching this. Subscribe to Thinking in Math channel for this and other interesting math topics. And we always welcome your feedbacks. Leave your questions and suggestions in the comments.